Hi Garden City, it's me, Miss Korby. I'm back to read another story to you today. Hope everyone's doing well. I miss you all very, very much. The story I picked to read today is called The Secret Garden of George Washington Carver, and it's written by Jean Beretta and illustrated by Frank Morrison. And if you're a fifth grader, you maybe recognize that name, Frank Morrison. He also illustrated the book The Roots of Rap. So I have next to me here a jar of peanut butter. You might be wondering, what's up with that? So see if you can figure out what the connection is between my jar of Skippy peanut butter and the story I'm about to read to you. And also, if you can, be thinking about this word perseverance as we go along. Perseverance, maybe you've heard of that word, but it means to keep going no matter what, despite obstacles, despite hardships, to keep going. And following your passion and your talents and your interests no matter what, not letting anything get in your way. So I'll go ahead and get started with the story. I hope you enjoy it. Again, it's The Secret Garden of George Washington Carver. Washington, D.C., 1921, George Washington Carver addresses the U.S. Congress. We are just beginning to learn the value of the peanut, Carver told the congressman. Some of them laughed. One man made a racist remark. As a black man speaking to a room of all white representatives, Carver was not among friends. African Americans were still segregated by U.S. federal law and treated as second-class citizens. Carver had been given only 10 minutes to speak. He gave the audience 10 minutes they would never forget. Carver showed them how peanuts could be used to make many items, including face cream, soaps, ink, cheese, instant coffee, paper, paints, glue, and much, much more. When his time was up, they were impressed. The chairman encouraged him to keep going. "Go ahead, brother, your time is unlimited." Carver spoke for over an hour. From the time he was a boy, he had a deep desire to share what he knew. So then, why did he once have a secret garden? Kind of wondering, what does a secret garden have to do with George Washington Carver speaking in front of Congress? Diamond Grove, Missouri, 1874. No one knew about the garden George kept hidden on the Carver farm. No one saw how the child cared for his flowers and how much he loved them. When he watered the clovers, their petals curved up like a smile. The black-eyed Susans winked when he patted the soil around their roots. He sang to the dandelions, and they waved to him with their long leaves. Beautiful pictures in this book. People used to tell him that growing flowers was a foolish waste of time. "Why don't you grow something we can eat?" neighbors said. "You can't make money selling flowers," said his brother James. "They're only good for attracting bees." "Don't let flowers take you away from your chores," warned Moses and Susan Carver. George was born in 1864. Like his mother and his brother, he was enslaved on the Carver farm. While still a baby, George and his mother were kidnapped. Days later, he was found close to death and brought back to the Carvers. His mother was never seen again. The next year, slavery was outlawed in the United States. Moses and Susan Carver did not have children of their own and raised George and his brother on the farm. George was a sickly child, which meant less time working and more time exploring. He filled the house with a steady stream of interesting plants and rocks. So here you can see some of the hardships and racist actions that George Washington Carver and his brother had to overcome. He almost died. Yeah, he never saw his mother again. Some really sad things happened in his life. Susan taught him how to be creative with the little that they had. Nothing was wasted. Turkey feathers were used to make sewing needles. They made dyes from roots and berries and nuts and berries. And they used plants for leaves and medicine. Every day, he ran into the woods to discover something new. I want to know the name of every stone and flower and insect and bird and beast, he said. Education was limited at home. George had only one book, which he had read dozens of times. I know this book by heart, he told Susan. I wish I could go to school with the white children. Slavery had ended, but U.S. segregation laws still denied black people the same rights as whites. George decided to create his own classroom in the woods and study the subject he loved most, nature. And no matter how much people discouraged him, he wanted to grow flowers. Boy, this is a really good example of perseverance. Obstacles of segregation, and he persevered. George decided to grow them in a secret garden so no one could find them or tease him. It became a magical place for him. Tiny seeds went into the dirt and transformed into beautiful flowers. In his mind, the garden was a true gift from God, whom he called the Great Creator. Each day, George rolled the soil between his fingers to make sure it wasn't too wet or too dry. Some plants needed more rain, and some needed more sun. Again, the pictures are so colorful and beautiful in this picture, in this book. I like this picture. He's getting a little older, isn't he? Come here, you need a haircut, George said as he cradled a daisy in his hand and clipped off its dry petals. He spread them around the soil to help the flowers grow. At first the gardening was difficult because he couldn't ask for help and reveal his secret. The more he experimented, the more he learned. George studied each new season by painting the life cycles of the flowers. Berries were used to make paints, twigs and grass were used to make brushes. He learned how to protect the roots through the winter so flowers could be reborn in the spring. "Welcome back," he whispered to the tiny sprouts. It was a special garden and could have remained secret forever, but eventually the young boy's generosity changed that. I like how he talked to the plants. When George met a neighbor with a sick plant or flower, he offered to care for it. Part of his garden became a plant hospital. Wilting plants went in and blooming plants came out. No one could believe that such a small child had so many big ideas. "Here comes the plant doctor," they would say whenever he paid a visit. Oh, this is a really colorful page. Look at the pictures and all the flowers. "Think of all the people I can help," he told the garden. It inspired him to see their flowers growing side by side with his flowers. George breathed a sigh of relief. There's no need to be secret anymore. George knew there was much to see and learn away from the farm. At the age of 12, he said goodbye to his garden and set off on his own for a new adventure. In Enosha, Missouri, he lived with Mariah Watkins, who gave him advice he carried into adulthood. "Learn all you can, George, then give it all back to our people." I wonder what you think she meant. What do you think she meant by "give it back to our people"? I kind of think she means maybe to learn a lot and help the black community, because a lot of what they were dealing with was racism and white people were not allowing equal rights at this time. So she was really encouraging him to go out and learn and educate himself and give back to his community and his family. Over the next 18 years, he lived in several states and attended many schools to study art and agriculture. It was not easy. After being accepted to Highland College in 1885, the all-white school refused to admit him when they learned he was an African American. But the young man was determined to get an education. In 1896, George Washington Carver became the first black man to study to study at, graduate from, and teach at Iowa Agricultural College. So here's another obstacle he had to overcome. He was not admitted into a college because he was a black man. They said he could go until they found out that he was black, and then they said, oh no, you can't come here. So he found another college to go to. He was able to study at the Iowa State College. The same year, Booker T. Washington, president of the Tuskegee Institute, hired him to teach agriculture. When Carver first arrived, he said everything looked hungry. The land, the cotton, the cattle, the people. Farmers were in trouble. Cotton crops were destroying their land. With little money and second-rate equipment, Carver built Tuskegee's first farming laboratory. Here he is working in the laboratory over here. He experimented with new crops to replace cotton, like sweet potatoes and soybeans, but the peanut was his champion. It had nutrients to nourish the soil. He convinced farmers to grow peanuts and then developed over 300 uses for them. It wasn't long before peanuts became the largest crop in the South. Oh, that's interesting. They said George Washington Carver discovered that peanuts actually replenished replenished the soil, made the soil healthier by adding nutrients back. Carver also created a traveling schoolhouse called the Jessup Agricultural Wagon to visit poor farmers. It offered everything from tool demonstrations to medical care to pamphlets on how to improve farms and live healthier. In its first summer, the wagon visited over 6,000 people. That is amazing. Carver's advice saved countless farmers and families. What would you like to learn today? He asked a farmer. The best time to plow, or how to raise a strong cow? So they had lots of questions. How amazing. Farmers didn't even have to leave their farm. George Washington Carver came to them. Wherever he traveled, people went to hear him speak. After his historic day in front of the U.S. Congress, he became a living folk hero. He was also recognized as an early environmentalist, a voice for racial harmony, and advisor to world leaders. With his new fame came many awards and honors, yet he remained a humble man, always ready to serve humanity. Since his days on the Carver farm, one thing never changed. Day after day, I spend in the woods alone, in order to collect my floral beauties and put them in my little garden I had hidden in the brush not far from the house. Regard nature, revere nature, respect nature. These are the words George Washington Carver lived by his entire life. And here's a picture of him as a very old man. At the end of this book, they have a really interesting timeline of all the events that occurred during George Washington Carver's life. He lived to be 79 years old. He passed away on January 5th, 1943, and in 1945, the U.S. Congress designated January 5th as George Washington Carver Day in recognition of all the accomplishments that he made. So I hope you enjoyed that story. I hope you learned a lot about George Washington Carver. I know I did. Hopefully you made a connection to the peanut butter here and all the ways that he was able to find uses for the peanut, not only in peanut butter, but in other ways as well. And I also was inspired after reading the story to start my own little plant here. So I've got an avocado pit here that I've just started growing. So we'll see if I can get a plant to grow from that. So thank you so much for listening to the story, and I will see you soon. Keep reading and keep learning. Miss you. Bye-bye.